All right, so UFC 291 happened about 2 days ago now. It was a great card. In my opinion, it's the most fun I've had watching a card in 2023, to be honest. There's some great highlight reel moments. It was a great card. Majority of the fights were finishes. Even the ones that went to decision were pretty decent fights. But I'm going to be doing my fights to make after UFC 291 in this video. Just quickly, I do want to say, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get my prediction video out because it wasn't processing through my editor or processing through YouTube. But I did go 8-3 on the card for predictions. I did my video with UFC Zoned, and I believe he was able to get it on his channel. So if you want to check it out, I definitely would. I had a lot of fun making it. I'm sure you would have a lot of fun watching it. But yeah, like I said, 8-3 on the card, did pretty decent. You might notice the background's different for this video. That is because I'm on vacation, but I did want to get this video out for you guys anyways. So, fights to make after UFC 291. First off, Roman Kopylov versus Joe Pyfer. I know a lot of people are going to want to keep these guys away from each other and wait until they're ranked contenders to fight, which does make sense because, it would definitely, if these guys are both hyped up prospects, like both of these guys can easily get in the top 10 in my opinion. Although Roman Kopylov had a rough start to his UFC career, he's doing really good now, but like this is the UFC, this isn't boxing, we got to make the fun fights when they make sense. And right now, this fight makes sense to me. Like Joe Pyfer's 2-0 in the UFC. Both of his wins are by knockout or TKO. Roman Kopylov 3-2 in the UFC, but he's on a 3-fight winning streak since he started off 0-2, and all three of his wins are by knockout or TKO. So this is a fun fight for the fans. And Roman Kopylov, although he's on a 3-fight winning streak, it is to decent competition, but I don't think he's quite deserving of a top 15 fighter yet. Neither is Joe Pyfer, in my opinion. You could give him a top 15 fighter. You could make the argument, but I wouldn't rush him up there quite quick enough. So I think the winner of this fight could definitely get a top 15 ranked fighter. But yeah, make this fight. Two hyped up prospects, two knockout artists. They can both grapple pretty decently as well. Pyfer's probably better on the ground than Kopylov. But either way, I think this would be mostly a stand-up fight. It'd be really fun for the fans. And yeah, winner of this fight will get a top 15 fight next. Next up, Trevin Giles lost to Gabriel Bonfim in the featured prelim. I think you got to do him versus Max Griffin next. It's just a fun fight, it's two veterans. There's not really much left for these guys. They're not actually. Trevin Giles actually isn't that old, I think, but he has had quite a few fights in the UFC. He's had 12 UFC fights. He won 7-5. Max Griffin has had quite a few UFC fights as well. He's 7-8 in the UFC, but don't let that depict you. Like he is definitely a good fighter. He's just fought pretty decent competition. So this would be mostly a stand-up fight. You got Trevin Giles, who's a little more technical in the boxing. He'd probably try to utilize his jab a little bit. Maybe he'd try to grapple a little bit too. You got Max Griffin, who's a bit more of the, he's decently technical himself, but if there is going to be a finish, I'd sense it coming from Max Griffin. But like I said, this is just a fun fight between two pretty decent veterans. I think you can make it the featured prelim of a UFC fight night. And yeah, let's make this fight. Sounds fun. Now, Gabriel Bonfim beat Trevin Giles in the featured prelim. And what's next for him? I'm thinking Neil Magny. Um, I saw people say Mike Malott as well, and I'm a huge fan of that fight. Definitely do that as well. Those are like two of the biggest hyped up prospects in the welterweight division right now. But I do think that Gabriel Bonfim is deserving of a ranked opponent. Although I did say Joe Pyfer wasn't, in my opinion, Gabriel Bonfim versus Neil Magny is a more even fight at this point than like a Joe Pyfer versus a ranked opponent. It's just that, Gabriel Bonfim, like Neil Magny isn't the greatest welterweight in the world. He's ranked, but he's not insane. He's shown many times before that he leaves his neck open. He is there to be submitted. He got arm triangled by Gilbert Burns. It's fine, no problem. But he's been submitted a few times in his career, and he's not the greatest on the fight or on the feet either. But he does have a big reach advantage. He's 6'3" compared to Bonfim's 6'1", and then 80 inches of reach compared to 72 inches of reach. So I do think Gabriel Bonfim would get this fight done. But, it's not a terrible fight for Neil Magny. He has the big reach advantage. It would be a bit of a problem for Bonfim early on, I think, but I do think eventually Bonfim would make those reads, and he'd be able to get this one done and start looking to go up even higher in the rankings. This is a fighter that I do want to see in the rankings very, very soon. Next up, Michael Chiesa. I think it's time for him to retire. I don't want to disrespect Michael Chiesa because I do like him, but he didn't look very good out there. Like he did not look like himself. Every time he would get hit, he would panic shoot. Even when he wasn't getting hit, when Kevin Holland was just swarming him, he was still panic shooting. Before that fight, he was coming off a 2-year-long layoff with a ton of back injuries. I think they said on the broadcast booth he might have even needed back surgery at some point. And it's just, he's 35 years old. He's not looking great anymore. He got submitted by Luque, lost to Sean Brady, got submitted by Kevin Holland. And I am seeing he does kind of struggle to make adjustments. You know what I mean? He's been Darce choked so many times in his career now, and he just fails to make that adjustment. He just still leaves his neck out. And it's, at 35, he said before the Kevin Holland fight that the whole reason he was coming back was because he wanted to make another run at the title. Let's not forget, at some point, like 2-3 years ago, Michael Chiesa was like ranked number 5 in the world. This guy was like one fight away from a title shot, but he's not looking like he's going to make another run at the title shot. At 35 years old, coming off a 3-fight losing streak to guys like Kevin Holland, Sean Brady, Luque, who may not even be title contenders themselves, it's time for him to retire, in my opinion. He had a decent career, He had wins over Neil Magny, Rafael dos Anjos, Diego Sanchez, Carlos Condit, Beneil Dariush, which is very, very good, Jim Miller, Trinaldo, Alaya Quinta, and he was the season 15 winner of The Ultimate Fighter. It's not like he had a bad career. He had a very, very good career in the UFC, definitely an above-average career, and, it's time for him to retire. He's already has a job on the broadcast booth sometimes for the UFC. So I'd like to see him do that a little bit more. He can make money there. He doesn't have to leave the sport. I would just retire from fighting. Next up, Kevin Holland had a great win over Michael Chiesa. Submitted him in the first round. And I think next for him is to face Jack Della Maddalena. Now, Jack Della Maddalena fought about 3 weeks ago, maybe now. But he looked pretty good. I see a lot of people, saying his performance was bad, but you got to understand, he had to prepare for 3 different opponents. He knew nothing about his last opponent. He got the fight on like a week's notice. He had to do 2 weight cuts in the span of like a week. So you can't say much about that. This is a perfect fight to make, in my opinion. Kevin Holland wants the fun fights. And this is a fun fight. These are 2 guys who are going to stand and swing. Now, the thing is, Jack Della Maddalena has a huge reach disadvantage. His height is 5'11" compared to Holland's 6'3", and his reach is 73 inches compared to Holland's 81. But Holland's not exactly the type of guy, although he's lanky and he's not exactly the type of guy to, fight off the jab and fight off the leg kick. Like, he puts on entertaining fights, and so does Jack Della Maddalena. So these are 2 guys that I think are just going to, it's going to end in a finish. They're going to swing. They're going to brawl. It's going to be a great fight. Get this on that UFC 293 Sydney card, in my opinion, because that card is looking pretty weak right now. It doesn't have a main event yet, and there's not that many great fights announced on the card yet. Like, the only fight I can really think of that's on that card right now is Kai Kara France versus Manel Kopp. But I know it's in September, so it's still pretty close. But yeah, Kevin Holland versus Jack Della Maddalena would definitely add an excitement factor to that card. And yeah, it's just a great fight to make. Now for Tony Ferguson, it's sad to say, but it is time for him to retire. I think it was time for him to retire a while ago, to be completely honest, but definitely now. although everyone wants to keep seeing him fight, I want to keep seeing him fight, but I don't want to keep seeing him lose. He was 15-1 in the UFC at some point. Now he's 15-7 in the UFC. He's lost his last 6 fights, lost 4 of them by finish, 2 of them by submission, 2 of them by TKO, one of them by clean KO, actually. So it's, Tony Ferguson had a great career. I know his dream was to get that undisputed UFC championship, but you can't blame him. They never gave him his title shot. And even when they did, something always went wrong. He would get injured or his opponent would get injured. But either way, he still got interim UFC champion. Like, he still technically was a UFC champion. He did hold the belt. He was the season 13 winner of The Ultimate Fighter. He's easily a top 10 lightweight of all time, especially when you take his prime. Like, some would argue even top 5 lightweight of all time, and I don't hate the argument. He had an 80% finish rate throughout his career, and he's by far the most beloved fighter of all time. I've never met anyone in my entire life say that they hate Tony Ferguson. You heard the chants for him in his fight against Bobby Green. Everyone wanted this guy to win, but sadly it's not happening, so it's time for him to retire. He had a great resume. He had a great career. He beat guys like Rafael dos Anjos, Anthony Pettis, Edson Barboza, Donald Cerrone, Eve Edwards. List goes on. But he's just not himself anymore. I will give it to him. He is a hard worker. His cardio looked pretty good. His technique honestly looked decent. But he's just too old now. He's gotten a lot slower. He doesn't have to leave the game completely, like, he could help corner fighters. And that's one of the reasons I'm thinking he's having such a hard time retiring, is because he's put his life into this, and it's kind of hard to accept that it's over, especially since he never got that undisputed championship, even though he did get interim. But yeah, he doesn't have to leave the game completely. I know it's hard for him to retire. He's dreamed of this his whole life. He's worked so hard for it. But yeah, it's sad, but it's time to go. Let's see him corner fighters. Let's see him stay in the game, but not as a fighter. That's all I got to say about Tony. It's sad, but he's got to retire, in my opinion. Now, for Bobby Green, sadly, he choked out Tony Ferguson with an arm triangle with like 7 seconds left of the fight. But I want to see him fight Paddy Pimblett. Now, this is a great fight to make, in my opinion, just because you have to give Paddy Pimblett a jump up in competition. You know what I mean? Like, even his last fight against Jared Gordon, let's just be honest, he definitely lost. Like, I don't think there's a single person on the planet other than those 2 judges, or 3 judges, it might have been even been UD, but there's not a single person on the planet other than those judges that night who thinks Paddy Pimblett beat Jared Gordon. But either way, he still technically got the win. So let's give him a jump up in competition against Bobby Green. The timing works out perfectly because Paddy Pimblett was injured, so he had to take about a year off. He's going to be coming back around December or January. So let's get him against Bobby Green on that December card. It would probably be the same card as Conor McGregor as long as everything goes to plan. But this is a pretty close fight. I think Bobby Green's the much better fighter. Bobby Green is he's a pretty good fighter himself. He's a just outside the rankings type of guy. But he does leave his hands down. So it does leave room for Paddy Pimblett to catch him. And, if it goes to decision, judges are going to give it to Paddy Pimblett. So, yeah, this is a good fight to make. The fans would get excited for it. All the hardcores know Bobby Green, and everyone knows Paddy Pimblett. So it's a fight that would be exciting. Maybe it can open up the main card of that December pay-per-view. And, yeah, let's make this fight happen. Now, Marcos Rogerio de Lima, I want to see him fight Dontale Mayes. This was kind of a hard fight to make, in my opinion, because there's not really much for Marcos Rogerio de Lima. I was going to say do him versus Blagoy Ivanov, but I'm going to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of fighters getting rematches like only a year after, unless if it's for a title. If it's for a title, I'm completely fine with rematches in a year. But like Marcos Rogerio de Lima lost to Blagoy Ivanov literally like a year ago. So even though it makes sense rankings wise, like, again, I don't think anyone really cares to see that rematch. So let's at least give him a new opponent in Dontale Mayes. It's not the greatest fight, but it's all that I can really think of that would be next for him. I do think Marcos Rogerio de Lima is the better, more technical fighter, but Dontale Mayes is bigger. He's 6'6" compared to 6'1", 81 inches of reach compared to 75 for De Lima. So although I would be picking De Lima in this fight, it is still a decently even fight, and it's like I said, there's not much left for De Lima to do. Now, Derrick Lewis had an amazing 35-second knockout or something against Marcos Rogerio de Lima. He hit him with a flying knee and followed up with some hard ground and pound. I want to do him versus Jairzinho Rozenstru. Now, if you watched my fights to make after UFC London video, you would have seen. Train just went by, sorry. But if you watched my fights to make after UFC London video, you would have seen that I said to do Marcin Tybura versus Jairzinho Rozenstru, which I'm still completely fine with that fight. But I think this one would be more entertaining and more fun for the fans to watch. It's two big boys, two big hitters. They're gonna swing. Jairzinho Rozenstru, he's very good off the counter. So we'd see Derrick Lewis coming forward. But either way, if Derrick Lewis is able to clip Rozenstru's going out. If Rozenstru's able to hit Lewis off the counter, Lewis is probably going out. So it's a fun fight. See them. They're both going to swang and bang in the heavyweight division. You can make it like a fight night. Maybe a fight night main event, maybe a fight night co-main event. Maybe just put it as the opener of the main card on a pay-per-view. But yeah, this is 100% a fight the fans would want to see, so let's make it next. Jan Blachowicz lost a very, very close decision to Alex Pereira. If I were to say I would have edged it to Alex Pereira, I did agree with the judges, but it was still very close, could have gone either way. But I want to see Jan Blachowicz fight Johnny Walker. This is a fight that would be entertaining because Jan Blachowicz and Johnny Walker are rarely in bad fights. Although, to be fair, their last fights were decently dull. But before that, they're rarely ever in bad fights. I know Jan Blachowicz would be a huge favorite here. He definitely is the better fighter. But it's just what makes sense rankings-wise. You can argue that Jan Blachowicz is 1-3 in his last 4 fights. So I do think he needs a bit of a step down in competition. And Johnny Walker deserves a step up. He's on a 3-fight winning streak. He's ranked number 5 in the division, I believe. Jan Blachowicz is ranked number 2 or 3, maybe even 4 now. So, yeah, let's make this fight number 3 versus number 5. They're both fun fighters. Jan Blachowicz hits really hard. Johnny Walker hits really hard. If I were to pick a winner for this, I would pick Jan Blachowicz by knockout. But this, in my opinion, would be a great fight night main event. Johnny Walker is the taller fighter, he's the longer fighter, but Jan Blachowicz is the better fighter, in my opinion. So it is still a decently close fight. Let's make this a fight night main event. Maybe, honestly, neither of the guys really took a ton of damage in their last fight. So you can make it like a fight night main event, honestly, for like October, maybe early November. Let's get this fight happening. Now, Alex Pereira got the win over Jan Blachowicz in the co-main event. And let's do him versus Jiri Prochazka for the vacant UFC light heavyweight championship. Like I said, there's no champion right now. Jamal Hill had to vacate. But they did promise Jiri Prochazka a chance at the title when he came back because he did vacate the belt originally. They're both going to be coming back around similar times. Alex Pereira didn't take a ton of damage against Jan Blachowicz. Jiri Prochazka is pretty much healed up from his injury by now. So I think this could be the main event of the December pay-per-view if it's not McGregor. If it is, maybe get it the co-main, which I'd rather this be the main event than McGregor, to be honest. But we know the UFC wouldn't do that. Or maybe bring it out till January. But I'd rather see this fight happen in December, to be honest. I don't want to go too long without having a UFC light heavyweight champion. Jiri Prochazka, he hits very hard. He's one of the weirdest strikers the UFC's ever seen. Alex Pereira hits crazy hard as well. In my opinion, this is a fight where someone's going to go to sleep. The height and reaches are very similar. Like I said, they've both been champions before. It's an entertaining fight. They're both deserving of it. Jiri Prochazka, some people would argue, is still the champion because he had to vacate. Alex Pereira got that title eliminator win over Jan Blachowicz. There's not much else you can really argue that's next for this fight, to be honest. Now, Dustin Poirier took the L in the main event. Brutal head kick, but Dustin Poirier is still elite, you got to admit. It's time for a step down, though. It is. Not necessarily a step down, but it's time to fight someone other than Justin Gaethje or Michael Chandler. You know what I mean? So let's do Dustin Poirier versus the winner of Rafael Fiziev versus Matthias Gamrot. Now, this is a main event happening. Can't remember if it's September or October, but it is happening soon, main event of a fight night. I do think that they're going to go to war. So I think that the winner of that fight will probably need a bit of time off. Dustin Poirier, he got knocked out cold. Definitely needs a bit of time off. But I think you can make this either a fight night main event itself or like a featured fight on a pay-per-view, sometime maybe in January, February, if that's enough time for both fighters to recover. I do believe Fiziev will get the win, but against Matthias Gamrot, but if the fight goes out past the third round, Fiziev could easily gas and Matthias Gamrot takes it from there. But no matter who wins, whether it's Gamrot, whether it's Fiziev, this is a new fight. This is someone who Poirier hasn't fought yet, fighting someone from the newer generation of the UFC lightweights. So yeah, there's not really much other fights to make, in my opinion. This is what makes sense. This is what Fiziev or Gamrot deserves. They deserve a shot at that top 5. And Poirier, it's not like he's taking too big of a step down. He'd be fighting like the number 6 ranked guy anyways. So yeah, let's make this fight happen. Now the last fight to make, Justin Gaethje got a brutal head kick KO against Dustin Poirier. It's a great fight up until that point, and then he set it up perfectly. He was showing it to him in the first round, and then in the second round, it landed flush right on the temple, and it put Poirier out cold. Let's do Gaethje, the BMF, versus the winner of Oliveira versus Makhachev. I think it's time to get Gaethje another title shot. Sadly, this would, unless if he wins, which he could win. He could put anybody to sleep. But this could easily be his last fight. He said he wants to make one last run at the title. Even if he wins, I'm not sure if he's planning on vacating it after. But this is a fight you need to tune in for. Gaethje said it himself. One last run at the title, and then I'm done. You got to tune in the Gaethje fights. He's not going to be around much longer. But the winner of Oliveira versus Makhachev in October, I think Justin Gaethje deserves the next title shot after. He might have to wait for Volkanovski, as Volkanovski maybe might end up moving up and fighting Islam Makhachev after Oliveira, or fighting Oliveira after the Makhachev fight if he wins. But either way, no matter who wins this fight, even if Gaethje has to go with, or even if Gaethje has to wait for Alexander Volkanovski, he still definitely deserves a title shot. I don't want to see him fight anyone else. He fought Fiziev, who nobody wanted to fight. Got the win there as a pretty big underdog. Fought Poirier, was a slight underdog, but a lot of people were picking him to win, to be honest. I think most were. But he got that head kick KO. Insane knockout. One of the best I've seen in a while. So, yeah, he's definitely deserving of that title shot. I'm riding with my boy Oliveira all the way. Think he'll be fighting Oliveira. I can never doubt that guy. But no matter who wins between Oliveira versus Makhachev, hoping for Oliveira, but no matter who it is, that's who Gaethje's going to fight next. It has to be. Gaethje's deserving of that title shot. There's nobody else for him to fight. Why not make this? It would be pure violence. If Oliveira beats Makhachev, we saw that first Oliveira-Gaethje fight. Although it only lasted like 3.5 minutes, it was fireworks until Oliveira got the W. And then Gaethje versus Islam. Who doesn't want to see that? Gaethje's stylistically one of the toughest matchups. I'm not saying you would definitely win. I'd probably pick Islam in that fight. But stylistically, he is one of the harder matchups for him. So either way, whether it's Oliveira, whether it's Makhachev, let's get Gaethje that title fight. And with that being said, I thank you guys so much for watching. I just wanted to get this video out for you guys quickly. Like I said before, I am on vacation, so that's why the background is different. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video anyways. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. I will drop my prediction video for the Sandhagen versus Font event very soon. Thank you guys, and I will see you later.